Ah, the Olympics, a famous event of prestige, honor, and respect, put on every 4 years that draws millions around the world to watch the greatest athletes push themselves to be the best in the world. But the games weren't always that way. Join us as we look at 1 year that made people ask, what the fuck? In 1900, the organizing committees for the Olympic Games, the OCOG, had just barely survived the utter shit show that was the Paris Olympics. The committee was looking to rebound with the 1904 Olympics, which was scheduled to happen in Chicago, Illinois. There was only one problem. The U.S. was celebrating the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase with the World's Fair event in St. Louis, Missouri at the exact same time that the Olympics were to happen. The organizers of the World's Fair were not too happy about having a competing international event happening at the same time as their event. So, America did what America does best. They bullied the Chicago OCOG into getting what they wanted from them. You see, the Olympic Games were nowhere near as popular an event as they are now. This was only the third modern Olympics, and the last Olympics were an utter mess. The Amateur Athletics Union, on the other hand, was a well-known and well-respected organization that was primed and ready to hold their international finals in St. Louis should the Olympics decide not to happen there. The Olympic Committee wasn't too keen on their event running alongside another World's Fair. That was the downfall of the 1900s Olympics. The Paris OCOG were spread far too thin between having to run the Olympics and running a World's Fair. Kind of like when you accidentally schedule a date with your significant other on the same night that you're supposed to be hanging out with your side piece. Sitcom hijinks commence! But they also knew that if the AAU ran their event against the Olympics, they would never be able to hold another Olympic Games again. So, begrudgingly, the Chicago OCOG relented, and the Games were to take place in St. Louis. May not have totally been a bad thing. Chicago wasn't exactly a shining metropolis at the time. But this posed another problem for the Olympic athletes, though. At the time, getting from Europe to the middle of the United States was a long and daunting trip. This was made even more difficult by the currently raging Russo-Japanese War. Not to mention the fact that the trip was expensive as fuck, and it was completely up to the athletes to bankroll getting to the Olympic events. So many athletes couldn't make it or backed out that the OCOG was allowing anyone that would show up to sign up for the athletic events. You could literally walk in off the street and think to yourself, why the fuck not? I think I'll go for a swim in the Mississippi River today. And why not get a gold medal along to go with it? In all, the Games had 647 participants, 526 being from the US, 56 from Canada, and 3 from Cuba. The old standby games from previous years were scheduled to happen, but new events that year were boxing, dumbbells, freestyle wrestling, and the decathlon. Another event that happened during the Games was called the Anthropology Days, later known as the Savage Olympics. If you were not white, you were forced out onto the street to compete in mud wrestling, grease pole climbing, pig chasing, and spear chucking. What an illustrious history the Olympics has, no? But that wasn't the only controversy of the 1904 Olympics. There were many more. One such was when Hungarian swimmer Zoltán Hamway had won the 100-meter freestyle swim, then came in first at the 50-meter. One American judge called bullshit and claimed that fellow American J. Scott Leary had won. This led to the American judge and another judge getting into a fist fight over the results. Homway and Leary had to do a tiebreaker race to decide the winner, which Homway won. I don't want to totally trash my fellow Americans here, so here are some positive notes. George Louis Iser won 6 medals in gymnastics while having one leg. Charles Daniels, a swimmer, was the first American to win gold in the Olympics with his win of the 220 and 440-yard freestyle swim. The crowning achievement on this absolute turd sandwich, though, was the St. Louis Olympic Marathon. Almost 25 miles of running in over 90-degree Fahrenheit sun beating down on you. 7 hills that span from 100 feet to 300 feet high. The terrain shifted between broken rocky mess and dusty as all hell. Not to mention the fact that the track was an open road along the city, so the runners had to dodge pedestrians, traffic, delivery wagons, trains, trolley cars, and some rather unfriendly animals. We'll get more into that later. Finally, there was one water station at the 6-mile mark. But the crafty runners, they were able to figure out that at the 12-mile mark, there was a well, kind of off the road a little bit, that nobody else knew about. And if this sounds harsh, that's because it is. But don't worry, it's all being done for science. The marathon's organizer, James Sullivan, believed in an idea called forced dehydration theory, which is the idea that if athletes are forced to dehydrate during an event, they'll perform better. What? So he set out to use this marathon as an experiment to prove this theory. 40 athletes were scheduled to run in the marathon. 8 runners were smart enough, or lucky enough, and didn't show up. The other 32 were made up mostly of previous Olympic runners and Boston Marathon runners. Mostly. You see, there was also Fred Lors, a New York bricklayer that won an AAU race, the prize being a trip to compete in this marathon. Felix Carvajal was a Cuban mailman that dreamt of running in the Olympics, so he raised enough money to pay for his trip to St. Louis. When he got to New Orleans, though, he lost all that money gambling, drinking, and, well, enjoying NOLA. Undeterred, though, Carvajal hitchhiked his way to St. Louis. Then there is Lin Tao and John Masciani. They were 2 South Africans from the Tswana tribe that came shoeless and literally ran the marathon in bare feet. They were also the first black Africans to take part in the Olympics. Joining them were William Garcia, John Lorden, Sam Mellor, and Thomas Hicks. And 10 Greeks who'd never run a race in their entire lives. So on August 30th at 3 p.m., the runners lined up just in time to see Felix Carvajal hop out of a vehicle and run up to join the marathon in dress pants, long sleeve shirt, beret, and hiking shoes. Thankfully, the marathon officials allowed him a little bit of time to cut his dress pants into shorts. I say thankfully because things are about to get a whole lot more entertaining. Yeah. Before the marathon began, the runners' support vehicles were ordered to drive 1 meter ahead of their runners. When the starting pistol fired, the vehicles took off, leaving the runners in a cloud of dust so thick they could barely see the road in front of them. See what I mean? And this is just the beginning. Fred Lors, the bricklayer, took first place. John Lorden began violently puking all over himself from the exhaust and dust. He decided, fuck this, and bowed out immediately. Our guy Felix decided that this would be the perfect time to, stop and chit-chat with all the spectators. Sam Mellor started having debilitating cramps from the heat, dust, and dehydration and just dropped out. Thomas Hicks passed up the first watering spot and thought, I'll catch the next one. This way, I can catch up. Not long after, William Garcia collapsed, coughing up massive amounts of blood. He had been running through the dust clouds while being dehydrated so much that the dust had coated the inside of his esophagus, lungs, and stomach. This basically turned his internal organs into sandpaper that began shredding him from the inside. Literally. A spectator had to take him to the hospital or he was going to die right there of internal hemorrhaging. Lors began cramping up too. Instead of quitting though, he hopped onto the back of his support vehicle and began motoring down the road, waving at spectators and runners as he went. 10 miles in, Hicks was begging his handlers for water. The handlers were in on the experiment, so they refused, instead sponging out his mouth with warm water to ease him without actually hydrating him. What they did do, though, was force him to swallow a mix of egg whites and strychnine. Back then, people believed that in very small doses, strychnine was a stimulant. The truth is that what strychnine actually does is blocks the signals from your nerves to your muscles. So while you may not feel your muscles shutting down, they are. All of them. Some of you may be asking, isn't that doping? The answer, yes. Yes, it is. But the Olympics didn't have any doping rules yet. They also didn't have a lot of rules that we're about to see are taken full advantage of. Now, about this time, Lin Tao was suddenly having some issues of his own. You see, while running, he noticed that a large dog had started chasing him. So Lin ran faster. A whole mile off course. Now let's check in with our good buddy Felix Carvajal. Looks like he stopped to talk to some more spectators. And, did he just steal some peaches? I guess he got hungry. Well, they say you should eat every hour of a marathon, but I don't think stealing food is quite what they meant. A little over halfway through the marathon, Hicks has gotten so bad that his handlers had to literally carry him. They each grabbed an arm over their shoulders and carried his weight while he attempted to run. See what I mean? Rules be damned. We need someone to just win this thing. Carvajal soon realized that he was still hungry, even after eating his ill-gotten goods. That's when he noticed an apple orchard that he could snag some apples from. Too bad he didn't notice that the apples were rotten. Now suffering from stomach cramps as well as leg cramps, Carvajal decided that a nap might help alleviate the issue. I'd have just taken a shit and kept running. At the last 5 miles of the marathon, Lors began feeling better, so he jumped out the back of his support vehicle. Noticing that no one was around, he began running the last leg. As he came up, he was being cheered on as a hero. The first runner of the St. Louis Olympic Marathon was about to win. He walked right up to Alice Roosevelt, the president's daughter, ready to receive the gold medal. when suddenly
Shady! He doesn't even go here.
Hicks had all but given up at this point. But when he heard that Lors had been disqualified, he suddenly got a burst of motivation. Seeing the spark in his eyes, Hicks's handlers decided, yes! Let's dope him again! Not only that, let's get him to swallow this egg poison concoction with a shot of brandy! And I guess they dumped all that extra really warm water on him too, right? Yes. God damn it! So Hicks ran the last 2 miles hoisted up by his handlers, hallucinating that he still had 20 miles to run. Half dead from strychnine poisoning and begging to let him rest or just let him die. Still, Thomas Hicks is your winner. He was presented to receive the gold medal and promptly collapsed to the ground. It took 4 doctors and an hour later to revive him to a coherent state. When asked about the tracks, Hicks said that it was the most treacherous course he'd ever run. "13 other runners were able to finish. Carvajal came in 4th. Officials said that if he hadn't have stopped to nap, he probably would have won. Should have took that shit and kept running. 3 of the 10 Greeks finished the race in 5th, 10th, and 14th place. Lin Tao came in 9th, and John Masciani came in 12th. And thus ends the 1904 Olympics. After this disaster, the OCOG decided to get better control and save the Olympics. They held an interim event in Athens in 1906. 20 countries attended, and that event was much more of a success. James Sullivan, who by the way was the guy who thought that the Anthropology Days thing was a good idea, went on to ruin women's swimming in the 1912 Olympics by barring American women from participating. If you feel like that karma just passed this douche over completely, trust me, it didn't. You see, in 1911, he was in a train wreck that caused excruciatingly painful intestinal issues until his death from those intestinal issues in 1914. Not to leave this episode on a sour note, a couple of good things were created during the 1904 Summer Olympics. The heat during the World's Fair was so bad that Far East Tea House couldn't sell a single cup of their tea. So they began selling their tea served over ice, and thus you get iced tea. Right around the corner from them, Arnold Forneshow ran into an issue while selling ice cream. He was running out of the paper containers and was looking to anybody to help. Syrian-born Ernest Hamwi just happened to be selling thin waffles as a treat. Forneshow and Hamwi came up with the idea of rolling out the waffles to make a cone to sell the ice cream in. And that was the invention of the waffle cone. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like this episode, then why not check out our other episodes and maybe subscribe to see the next episode of History 101 What the Fuck. If you're interested to hear other weird facts from American-hosted World's Fairs, then tune into the next episode of Podcast 101 What the Fuck, where we'll be discussing just that. Once again, thanks everybody, and goodbye.